A lot of work goes into the design. I spend forever collecting my baseline, building my as-is understanding, then going through workshops and negotiations to get my 2B. And at that point, most people are feeling pretty exhausted and they feel like they've achieved a huge amount. Wow, I've got my design done. Fantastic, well done. Actually, you've not changed anything. The real work starts when you actually start implementing the design. And this is where it can go horribly wrong. The big issue is I've got my as-is and I've got my 2B. And I need to work out how am I going to transition from this as-is to this 2B. So I've got several questions I need to answer. The first is, what is my process for moving from the as-is to the 2B? Which people are just going to do the same job and just move? Which people are at risk? And in what sense are they at risk? But I've also got other questions. Do I want to ask people their preferences or not? I'm going to have information that's missing. For instance, do I know which people are willing to move geographic locations or not? Are they mobile? I have to come up with my criteria of who is going to get which role. If I've got this number of roles and this number of people available for that role, some people are going to be at risk of redundancy. Now, maybe some of these would want to do another role. Great, fantastic. But not everyone. And maybe all of these people want to do this one as a first choice. What are my criteria for deciding who gets which one? There are numerous risks. There are legal risks because I am breaking the law. There are employee engagement and motivation risks. Everyone could just get disenfranchised and think, you know what, I want to move on, particularly the best people. There are risks of just falling over yourself and actually losing people. Believe it or not, if you're working with Excel islands everywhere, employees get lost. And what is that saying? There are risks of huge inefficiencies because you're spending so much time trying to work out what's going on and who's doing what, particularly with your Excel islands flying around and emails everywhere. And if that's happening, there's a risk of that ending up in the wrong hands and being disclosed. So there's security risks. When going through transition, you need to consider how you're going to work out who's going to get which role. What are your criteria? It could be a simple first in, first out, so based on tenure, or it could be competency based. So what are the right competencies for each role? Not just skills, but also behaviors and experiences. And then if you're going to do that kind of approach, traditionally, most organizations won't have that data. So you need to think through how to crowdsource that information or to run a process to get that information that's fair and that each employee thinks that has been a fair process and that reflects reality. You need to think through what level of confidentiality there needs to be on that. You also need to think through the communication at each stage, particularly if someone's at risk of redundancy. What is that process? How do you offer them other options? And how do you walk them through the process? And how do you know where you are in that process? So how do you know how many people are at each stage? Another big issue is the world is not static. It would be lovely if my as-is and my 2B were just frozen in time, in some sort of time warp. But that's not true. My as-is, people are coming and going anyway, no matter what. And my 2B design, as hard as I try to make it perfect, it won't be. It will change. It will constantly change with time. So not only am I trying to move people from here to here, I've got two moving targets. So that needs a lot of control and governance. I need governance to control my as-is. As I'm making my changes, are those the right ones and how do I keep on updating that? People don't think about this nearly enough. And it's the most dangerous part of the design.